Hi, everyone. This is Martin Willis with Podcast UFO. We're going into episode number 35 with Lloyd Pye on the Starchild Skull. A very different show today. I hope you enjoy it. And we're going to start right away into the news with Michael Lauk, and I pronounced his name wrong last time. How you doing, Michael?
Good. How are you doing this week?
Good. So what's up in the news?
Well, this week we're going to cover a fake UFO video that's going viral, a new UFO show on Canadian television, but first, an asteroid flyby. So if you are hearing this, then NASA's Near-Earth Object Program was correct. An asteroid 2012 DA-14 did indeed miss the Earth. The projected course for the object actually brings it within the ring of satellites that orbit the Earth, which is approximately 22,000 miles above the equator. At its closest, the asteroid is expected to be only 17,200 miles above the Earth. It's 150 feet or so across, so asteroid 2012 DA-14 will actually be very hard to spot with even the best optical telescope. It was only discovered, as the name implies, in 2012, which is kind of scary considering how close it is. You can read more about it through the link to NASA at Podcast UFO's show notes.
So originally they said it was going to be 4,000 miles further out, and now it's 4,000 miles closer. So if you happen to be listening to this, we're safe, but if you watch the movie Melancholia, you know what can happen. Why do you think they changed the trajectory of this?
Well, these things are fairly hard to spot, and once you do spot them, they'll put out those first estimates. They have a very kind of short track to go with, and the longer you get to see where it's traveling, the better idea you can get of its overall orbit. So hopefully after this especially, because once it moves too far off, it's so small they won't be able to see it anymore. After this, we should be able to plot it out, hopefully for decades.
I see. So now this is going to be flying by like a day or two before the podcast goes up. So we may never be heard. Yeah, it's very possible.
It could be a nasty Valentine's surprise, yes.
That's right.
Canadian listeners will soon be able to watch Alien Mysteries, a UFO-focused show premiering March 3 on Canada's version of the Discovery Channel. According to press releases, the show will mix cutting-edge CGI and first-person accounts of encounters, as well as scientists and researchers probing the mysteries around UFOs. Although there has not been an official release of show topics, Stan Gordon reported back in October that a film crew for the show was shooting footage in Kecksburg. There is no word on the show coming to the U.S.
Now, do you think a show? I know that, like for instance, Canadian pickers, like American pickers, they geo-block that so you can't actually watch that here. They're probably going to do that with this? Do you think?
Well, I don't know. I mean, if they're shooting in Kecksburg, obviously they're covering at least one American topic. And given the popularity of the Ancient Aliens and Chasing UFOs and other shows, and the number of Discovery channels on cable, I would think it's going to hit America eventually. I hope so. It sounds kind of cool.
I don't know who is posting the National Geographic's Chasing UFOs on YouTube, but that's a possibility. Someone might do that.
Well, yes, and Hulu and Netflix is trying to get original stuff, so that I'd say there's a good chance we're going to see it in America.
Yeah.
Speaking of CGI, a recent viral video featuring an encounter with large UFOs is actually a video created just to showcase the ability of computer-generated graphics to mimic reality. Although it is impressive, it should be remembered that it is not an amateur project and it could not be easily replicated. According to the Daily Mail, it was created by a professional special effects artist named Aristomenes Zerbas to demonstrate that a 100% computer-generated image can appear to be real. An IMDb search shows that Zerbas has worked on 3 Star Trek series, the feature film Titanic, Hellboy, and a number of other projects. You can find links to the video and Zerbas IMDb entry in the show notes.
That is one of these videos that is just plain too clear, crystal clear, too good to be true. And it's kind of like, have you seen the UFOs in Mexico video clip on YouTube?
Yeah, yes, the one with the palm trees?
Yeah. Now, that one has 19 million, talk about going viral, 19 million views. And most people that watch that think that's real, but that's CGI, and that's a complete hoax. It's not like put up there like this person did, saying it's a hoax. That's saying it's real, and a lot of people believe it is, which is a shame.
Yes, that's the one where, if I'm thinking of the same one as you, the palm trees are identical.
That's right.
Yes. Yeah. The scary thing I think about this is I say it's going to, within a year, a skeptic will use this as an example of how, quote-unquote, easy it is to fake these things.
Oh, I'm sure they have already.
And you have to remember, this is a guy with 15-plus years of experience who spent 4 months to make a 30-second segment.
Wow.
So it's not that easy.
You and I have talked about this before, and clearly the cell phone camera is what most people have out there. You know, it won't be too long before someone will be hoaxing in that mode, which would be much more believable, really.
Well, yeah, and the thing is, anytime you see a long-distance object in the sky, particularly a brightly lit sky, and it's very clear and it's supposed to be cell phone footage, you pretty much can say, no way that the quarter-inch plastic lens on a cell phone made this footage, because even though cameras are everywhere now, good cameras aren't, and that's an important thing to remember when you're looking at all of these kind of videos. Finally this week, as recently reported by Linda Moulton Howe, Robbie Graham, the author of Silver Screen Saucers, the blog, has been investigating links between the 1980 film Hangar 18 and disclosure. In his article, he posits that the film's production company, Sun Classic Pictures, was owned by a man who was working with, for possibly the CIA and even possibly more secret organizations. The movie is currently available on Netflix's streaming service, as well as a few others, such as Dish Networks. Martin, did you get a chance to watch this?
Yes, I watched it a long time ago, and I watched it again recently, not too long ago. It's a fun movie, and there's a lot of parallels to what you think of in the UFO world, as far as all kinds of things, a lot of things that are brought up in that movie. And I'm curious to why there would be any link, why the CIA would want some of those subjects to get out there, if that is true.
That's kind of the tenuous point, I think, is you have to believe that there's some faction of the government that wants disclosure to be out there. I watched it again recently. I have fond memories of it from when I was a child seeing it, and I am a sucker for anything with Darren McGavin in it. Yeah,
it's kind of like I've heard you say before, it's a really bad movie, but one that it's good because it's bad.
It is awesome because it is bad.
So is that it for the news today?
I think that covers everything this week.
You're going to be writing on the Starchild, are you, for a blog coming up?
I did another one of my kind of what I like to think of as my primer post to kind of cover the bases and catch people up if they're maybe new to the topic on the Starchild, so that it's kind of meant to be a good background dossier before you listen to Lloyd Pye.
And that will be up on our site the same time the podcast is. Thank you very much, Michael.
Oh, thank you, and I will talk to you again next time.
And Lloyd Pye is coming up.
Flying saucers are real.
They've seen the aliens buzzing our missile silos.
The UFO phenomenon, either we like it or not, is already very much part of our reality.
That caused a compass needle to spin and spin.
And that's where the whole seed for the idea of underground bases at Dulce was planted.
They have very large eyes, and, I found their stare extremely difficult to bear.
I'm with Lloyd Pye down in Florida on Skype. How you doing, Lloyd?
I'm doing fine, Martin. Good to be with you today.
Thank you. And today we're going to talk about the Starchild Skull. It's very fascinating. And for the person out there who has not heard about this, briefly, can you tell the listener audience what this anomaly is, please?
Well, the Starchild Skull is a real, true bone skull that was found in about 1930 by a woman who believed it to be just a deformed human. When she died, it passed to the hands of another person, another couple. They handed it to a couple called Ray and Melanie Young from El Paso, Texas. It just so happened that Melanie had been a neonatal nurse for about 15 years, and she was able to look at it and tell immediately it was not a standard human deformity in the way that she understood deformity, and she understood deformity quite well. And in another great coincidence, she and her husband Ray were members of El Paso MUFON, Mutual UFO Network. So she not only knew that the skull wasn't from a typical human deformity, she also knew that skull could fit very comfortably in the head of a standard gray alien. So she came to believe that it was the skull of a gray alien and tried to get expert help from El Paso. They all assured her that it was just a cradle-boarded hydrocephalic. She should just take it home and forget about it. And so that's how she contacted me, because she knew that I studied skulls in my work with hominoids, which is Bigfoot, the abominable snowman, things like that. And she and Ray asked me if I would try to find out what it was. And here we are 14 years later in 2 days, on the 18th, 3 days, whatever it is, of this month will be exactly 14 years. So it's been a long haul trying to prove what it is. We know what it is. There's knowing it and there's proving it, and those are two different things. We know that it is indeed the skull of a gray alien, but we have to prove it to a level that skeptics and critics have not a word left to say about it.
That's right, and I am going to be asking you some of the skeptics' claims for your side on that as we go along here. Do you ever have any doubts about this claim?
No, I really don't. I did at first, the first year when Ray and Melanie first showed it to me in February of 1999. My first reaction was that it had to be a deformity of some kind, because we're all trained to believe that there is an answer for all anomalies, and that answer somehow fits within the known paradigm box. And so I told them, I said, I've never seen anything like this before. Obviously, Melanie was pointing out all the things that were, different about it and wrong about it in terms of being a human deformity. And I said, I agree with everything you're saying. Everything you're saying is true and correct. But to acknowledge that you're right is to acknowledge that we're holding an alien skull in our hands, and I'm just not really emotionally prepared to do that. And I wasn't. I said, it just has to be some kind of deformity. But after a year of taking it around to various experts and having each of them, their particular things, say to me, well, I can't really explain the eyes, but, it's got to be some kind of deformity, or I can't really explain the inner ears, but it's got to be some kind of deformity, or I can't explain these missing frontal sinuses, but it's got to be some kind of deformity. You hear that from 20 different experts, and you realize, wait a minute, nobody really understands this thing. When you put all the pieces together that each expert doesn't understand, it isn't a deformity. And so by the end of the year, I was convinced from a physical standpoint, there's no human correlation in the Starchild compared to a human skull. There's nothing you can point to in a human skull and have exactly the same thing in the Starchild.
Now, who are these experts, and are these experts respected in their field?
Sure. Well, there are a number of them listed in a report by Ted Robinson, Dr. Ted Robinson, that's on the Starchild Project website. And though Ted kept it for most of the year 2000 in Canada, in Vancouver, Canada, and he took it around to various colleague experts who were colleagues of his, and got them to put their names on a report that has been posted on the Starchild Project website, forever since they did the report in 2002 or 3 or whenever it was. And so, yes, and that's about a dozen of them. In the book I wrote in 2007, I also name a number of these experts who dealt with it and how they did and what their reaction was, if they allowed me to use their names. Now, a lot of experts would not allow me to use their names. They would give me their advice and their expertise, but they would not let me use their names because I'm sure everyone is aware mainstream science rigorously defends its paradigms against anybody who challenges it, especially those who challenge from the inside. And if you do that and you're caught on the wrong side of the UFO, alien, or hominoid question, you can very easily lose your job and your career. It's happened to a number of people. And so every scientist is aware of that the most conservative of their colleagues are absolutely ruthless in their defense of the paradigms, whatever the paradigms happen to be at whatever time in history you care to look at it. That's just the way science operates. They don't allow, they insist on groupthink, and they don't allow radical differences of opinion from what the collective is. And so most people who deal with the Starchild have to be very careful about being associated with it, except for ones like Dr. Ted Robinson, who are retired or who work for themselves in some capacity, who are just invulnerable, who don't draw a paycheck from some large scientific entity. Those people can allow their names to be used, but the majority of them are working with a lab or a university or something like that. They are vulnerable, and they can't do it.
Well, as long as science has been around, this has been a problem, it seems.
Yes.
You can look back and find all kinds of examples of this. Most of us who are familiar with the Starchild, we know, a lot of your arguments on why you think it is what it is. Can you tell us what the weakest part of the scientific evidence is?
Well, the weakest part of the scientific evidence that we have right now is simply that we have partial DNA results rather than full genome results. And that's only a function of our lack of funding. And we are working all the time toward trying to secure the amount that is needed to recover the entire genome. As long as it's partial, as long as the results are partial, science can in effect say, well, you haven't proved it. No matter what the partials look like, you haven't proved it. In the same way that with the physical evidence, as I was started to say earlier, we have 25 major differences between the Starchild skull and a human skull. We have several minor differences, but we have no single aspect of the Starchild skull that matches a human skull, and there are several parts of the Starchild that are absolutely unseen in humans, and furthermore, there's a couple things that are not seen in any species known on Earth. And yet, all of that disimpresses the mainstream, and all they say is, well, that's no problem. Nature can do anything. Nature can do anything. And given, left to its own devices, nature can produce all of that, absolutely all of that, and you can't prove that it can't. So science, in its own way, is a religion, in that it has a dogma, which is, like religion, that God can do anything. When you back a religious person into a corner and hit them with something they don't understand or can't deal with, they just say, well, God can do anything. And that bails them out. Mm-hmm. Well, science does exactly the same thing. When you push them in a corner relative to the Starchild, they just say, well, nature can do anything. Nature can do anything. Don't look to me for answers. I don't need to answer you. Nature can do anything. Nature speaks for me. And that's it. The one area where science can't do that, can't hide behind that curtain, is DNA, because that is their tool. That is their favorite tool. That is one of their most potent weapons, because DNA is the math of biology.
Right.
And when push comes to shove with DNA, it's 2 + 2 = 4 every time, and they know it, so they use it to their advantage. They are not in position to deal with it when that is turned against them. So that's why we're going to win this, Martin, because we do have DNA, and we have good, clean DNA. We have DNA that's fairly easy to recover and will be fairly easy to read when we have the money to do the full genomic read.
Now, from what I understand, these tests are very, very expensive. I want to talk a little bit about that. But first of all, the person that I do the news with and also writes a lot of the blogs, Michael Lout, had a good point the other day when we were talking off air, and that was, if this skull was, say, 1 million years old, you wouldn't have any problem finding the funding for it, because it could be looked at as some type of development or a missing link or whatever. But because it's only 900 years old, there's not enough interest to say that it was part of human development or something like that. Before you address that part, funding involved and the expense involved in full tests, isn't it like in the millions? Is that what we're talking?
Yes, that's what we're talking. We're talking in the low millions, around 3 million, we anticipate. Now, the reason everybody needs to understand how this works, how DNA recovery and analysis works. If you or I, or anybody listening right now, were to, for whatever reason, desire their entire genome, all 3.2 billion base pairs, 3.2 billion base pairs, to be recovered and analyzed, we could have that done for about $10,000 if we wanted that. The reason is simple. Our DNA is alive and fresh, so that when it came out of our bodies, that whole 3.2 billion base pairs, that's in the nucleus of nearly every cell in our body, every cell except our red blood cells. So, and our sex cells, of course, the individual sex cells. So you've got trillions of nuclei in each human body, and in each nucleus is those 3.2 billion base pairs. I know. It's shocking, the complexity of it, and trying to wrap your mind around it, but nonetheless, that's how it is. So to pull that out, that what's in that nucleus is our 46 chromosomes and our 22,000 genes coiled up in the twisted or the spiral ladder of DNA, with the steps on the ladder. We've all seen the twisted coil of DNA, and we've seen those what look like steps on the ladder. Well, those steps are the base pairs. You and I, or anybody listening, that would all come out, and it would unspool the machines that do the work from Illumina and others. They would unspool that 3.2 billion, those 22,000 genes, 46 chromosomes, in long strings, and be able to lay them out, put them together, figure it out. $10,000. Now, imagine those same long strings wadded up in a ball in the cell of the nucleus and put through a wood chipper. And out the other side comes pieces, flakes the size of glitter, just all over the floor, just glitter. You got to pick all that glitter up, and then you got to figure out each little piece and where each little piece goes relative to the other little pieces. That's what is required when things have been dead for a significant length of time. Now I think the cutoff is 50 years. That's considered ancient DNA. And no matter the level of degradation, that's ancient DNA. Now also mixed in with that ancient DNA is going to be the base pairs of the bacteria of death. When you die, your body is consumed by bacteria, fungi, mold that you carry within you and that are in the environment around you. Nature, left to its own devices, cleans its own plate completely, dust to dust. Just what the Bible says. So you've got the fact that there will be about 99% of what you recover, what you read out, is going to be from the bacteria of death. So you can eliminate that. You can eliminate. We know what it looks like, but it's just. I hope you're beginning to get an idea of how complicated it is. It's complicated and it's time consuming, but it is doable. That's the key. It is doable for money. You put enough money on the table, you can get any answer. Anything solved that you need solved, and the answer will be verifiable and repeatable by others. So, there's no juking with the data. It is what it is. You put it in the machines and you stand back and it comes out into a computer and the computer reads it. And it finds the pieces of glitter and it assembles them over time. You do, you and I, for $10,000, they do one run and they'd have it all right there. For something like the Starchild, you have to do anywhere from maybe 50 to 100 runs, and then you run what's called a compression program on each of those runs, and each little piece of glitter that's found in any particular run, only one of them will stand in the final draft, in the final analysis. But in the end, when you compress them all down, you'll have your whole genome. are very close to the whole genome, certainly enough to establish what it is, and that's what we need to do.
I asked you earlier what the weakest part of the science is. Now I'm going to ask you, what do you believe the strongest part is of why you believe it's extraterrestrial instead of a terrestrial anomaly?
Well, because the partial DNA makes very clear that it's not even in the ballpark of human. And, anybody that takes the time to look at the partial results of just the mitochondrial DNA, let's just talk about the mitochondrial DNA, because it's easy to understand, or easier to understand. Instead of 3.2 billion base pairs, we're talking about 16,569. All right, it's a number everybody can relate to. 3.2 billion is just, it's just a concept. 16,569 is a concrete number that everybody can grasp. Now, in those same cells that we were talking about a minute ago, with the nucleus holding 3.2 billion, outside the nucleus, floating in the cytoplasm between the outer wall of the nucleus and the inner wall of the cell itself, there is a material called cytoplasm. Floating in there are anywhere from hundreds to thousands of very small, very tiny little circular things. Imagine raisins in oatmeal or something. And those are your mitochondria. And they are handed down generation to generation in the female line in their eggs, because sperm are too small to carry mitochondria. So all of the mitochondria that any of us carry come from our mothers, our grandmothers, our great-grandmothers, right on down, and that's how they clock humanity's span on Earth at 200,000 years, because that's what our mitochondrial DNA say about it. So when you look at that, and it is one of the most well-understood parts of the human body, is our mitochondrial DNA. They have really, really broken that down, and everybody understands that. We all have under 120 differences in those 16,569 base pairs. Now, understand that. If you were to lay 16,569 markers up on a wall, you, me, everybody listening here would have differences on among those 16,000, but they would be specific differences that would divide us into between, right now their argument is between 30 and 40, what are called haplogroups. And the different haplogroups account for the differences there. Let's say you had 65 and I might have 72. That'll put you and me in a different haplogroup. But you and I could be in the exact same haplogroup. You could have the same 72 I had. I could have the same 65 you have, and we'd be in the same haplogroup. Share no relation whatsoever, except we're in the same haplogroup with our mitochondrial DNA. The maximum possible for humans is 120. That's from black Africans in South Africa, because they are the first humans. So it goes up to 120 within humans. Now, those same 16,569 that are in humans are slightly different in Neanderthals, but it's about the same. And in Neanderthals, they have 200 differences. So that's 80 more than we have. 200. So they're a different species. The new prehuman that's been discovered in 2010, Denisova, the Denisovans have 385. That's 185 more than Neanderthals. Now, the Denisovans were established with the DNA from the bone of a fingertip of the little finger, the very last joint of a little finger, and then later a tooth, both of which their mitochondria came in at 385, so they belong to a new prehuman species called Denisova. So you got 120 for humans, you have 200 for Neanderthals, and you have 385 for Denisovans. That's established. We have now recovered 9.5% of the Starchilds of 16,569, however many the Starchild's going to have. But we've recovered a lot of the Starchild's mitochondrial DNA. And from what 4 fragments. So what we've found in those 4 fragments are 93 variations. If you extrapolate that out to 100%, it's going to be in the range of 700, 800 differences. So at a minimum, the Starchild is a radically different kind of species. Call it what you will, primate, hominid, hominoid, whatever you call the Starchild, it is not human. It is not even in the ballpark of human, based on the partial recovery of the mitochondrial DNA, 4 fragments. When the whole and keep in mind that all that we've been able to pay for so far is what's called shotgun sequencing, where you just take your shot, you're just shotgunning, and you get what you get. Most of what is recovered that way comes from the so-called junk DNA, where we can't really tell anything about it. But those 4 fragments do come from the mitochondrial DNA. There's no doubt about that. So when we are able to have the money to recover the whole mitochondrial genome, there's no doubt, whatever you can say about the Starchild, it is not going to fall under 120. It is going to be wildly beyond Denisova. So it's going to be yet another type of species that has to be reckoned apart from humans. Well, where do you draw the line between terrestrial species and non-terrestrial species? We think that if we're up around 700, 800 differences, and Denisova is 385, I think it's fair to say that we can start making the argument that the Starchild was an alien, was not from Earth, non-terrestrial. When we get the full genome, the 3.2 billion or however many the Starchild has, or however many we can recover, it will be in the billions. And we will be able to then compare that to a human. And personally, I think it's going to be even more radically different than is the mitochondrial DNA. But it doesn't matter what it is. It's not going to be human. So we're going to win this. I mean, there's no doubt we're going to win it. All we need is the money to proceed. And we, as I say, work diligently every day, moving in that direction as hard as we can.
Well, I am going to ask you a couple of claims that the skeptics I've read, a couple of blogs online.
Sure.
And I also have a couple of linked in our article that was written that is on our website as well. I like for people to see all sides of things.
Sure.
One of the claims is that the haplogroup C has been found, and that's a Native American type.
This sounds like from Wikipedia, and I think that comes from Wikipedia, that quote. And the whole idea of Wikipedia treating anything to do with alternative knowledge in a fair way is ridiculous, because Wikipedia is a system that's created for and by and maintained by radical, hardcore mainstream scientists. If you go on, and really, frankly, most of the administrators I have found are graduate students, people who are buying into the mainstream, and so they defend it, just frantically defend it. So if you go on Wikipedia to say, learn how to shoe a horse, you're going to read an article by a guy or a person who knows how to shoe a horse. You go on Wikipedia to read an article about alternative knowledge that is attacking in some way an established paradigm, that article is going to be trashed by the administrators, and nothing but garbage is going to be put in there. And I can assure you that whatever the things that you read on Wikipedia about the Starchild and about me are just garbage, and we try to change it. Like for myself, it says I have 3 brothers. I have 2 brothers and a sister. You go in there and try to change it to 2 brothers and a sister. Well, I've had friends do it time and again, and they'll change it right back to 3 brothers. I've never had 3 brothers. But it's those kinds of things that you can't get them to change. Now, the truth of it is that somebody from the Wikipedia system heard me say this one time, and they went in to find out, what the truth of it was, because they thought I was exaggerating. And it turns out, and I didn't know this, Martin, but it's a surprise, they maintain a record of every change that's ever been made to a website, to one of their pages. Every change, ever. This is amazing to me. So this guy said, I owe you an apology. I checked it out, and it turns out that the Starchild page is one of the most tussled over pages on the whole of Wikipedia. You have more changes back and forth between your supporters and the administrators than is on the page of ex-President George W. Bush.
Wow.
Now, that's pretty good company in terms of, yeah, I know it's amazing to me. But the mainstream understands that the Starchild really represents a disaster in the making for them. It's not a problem for religion. Religion just says, God has, broader arms and can cover the whole universe. God can do anything, so it's not really a problem for religion. It's not really a problem for government. Government continues to be government no matter what. The only people that really suffer a real black eye for a long time is science, and they know that. So they work very hard to keep the kind of information that the Starchild represents suppressed, and so that they don't have to deal with the overturn of their paradigms. Now, this is true for Bigfoot as well. What the Starchild represents and what the mainstream is trying to protect, and what your audience needs to understand will go out the window, are several things. When UFOs, aliens, and hominoids are proven real. And what that is, first of all, Darwinian evolution has to go. Evolution, as it's understood, has to go, especially in terms of humans. It starts with humans. If aliens are there, the first thing you're going to have to look at is the idea that Zecharia Sitchin first posed, is that humans are genetically engineered creations of other beings. And as soon as you look at that, then you have to look at the idea that domesticated plants and animals are also genetic engineering, the result of genetic engineering. And so in short order, evolution is going to be gone, going to be dead. What are they going to do then? They're going to have to then start struggling again with creationists. Now, I'm not for that. I am not a creationist. Creationists are just as wrong as scientists are. All of this, I think, here on Earth is a result of intervention by others out there. Not God in the sense of religion, but gods with a small g in the sense of what the Sumerians wrote about, 4,000 and 5,000 years ago. So that'll take over. Also, as soon as UFOs and aliens are real, they have to throw out fossil fuels. You have to start looking seriously at the alternative energy forms that allow spacecraft to do what UFOs do. And so that's going to be a big problem for those who support the fossil fuel industry. So, these are major considerations. Another one that science has to deal with is you're going to lose gravity as the cohesive force of the universe. Now, why do they cling to gravity so desperately? Because it's Newton and it's Einstein. Take those guys out from underneath science in terms of astrophysics and all that. What do they have? Nothing. So then you have to go to the electric universe theory, which is out there, which is filled with PhDs supporting it. And the electric universe theory is what's going to take over. So you've got all these major overhauls in science. And so they fight and struggle and do everything they can to keep that day from coming, because the people sitting in the power chairs, and that's what you have to understand. Down at the ground, young scientists just starting out, they might be open to this sort of stuff. But those sitting in the power chairs, those in charge, don't want it to happen on their watch. They don't care if it happens after they're out. But while they're in, they don't want it to happen. And so this is what we're up against. And this is what not just I'm up against, but everybody in the field of alternative knowledge working in these areas that I just mentioned, free energy, hominoids, UFOs, aliens, all of that. We're up against this monolithic effort to keep it all squashed down and suppressed. And so when you go to Wikipedia and you read about anything relative to this, it's what you're going to be reading is the mainstream position, period. So, what you referenced is, it's just ridiculously wrong. And if you want to talk about any particular part of it, I'll explain it to you in detail, but that's the overview of why we're in the situation we're in.
No, that's fine. What I am trying to do here is on this particular blog that we have posted in the article that's on our website, I have a couple of claims. That was one of them that I wanted to pose to you to just hear your side, and I appreciate that. So I got a couple of more here. This is a quote directly from that blog. No independent scientific reports on this have ever been published, and there are suspicions that the data that demonstrates that it is human has been suppressed. What's your rebuttal against that?
Well, it's true that we've never had anything published formally in a peer-reviewed journal or anything like that, because you can't get peer-reviewed material. You can't get peers to review this kind of stuff. That's one of the chokeholds that science puts on things it doesn't want to deal with.
We're actually seeing this in the Bigfoot case that is in the news right now.
Right. You'll see it in every case. They don't let in that the whole thing of peer review is we're only going to review what we all agree is reviewable and isn't going to upset the apple cart in any significant way. So there's no point in submitting hominoid data or UFO or alien or like that. There's no point. What you have to do is put your evidence out. This is our plan anyway. This is really the only way we can do it. Get our data when we have our money, and we will then collect the full genome of the Starchild. We'll post it so that any scientist in the world who wants to deal with it can go over it and analyze it. At that point, then the mainstream peer-reviewed journals will have to come to us, because everybody will be talking about it, and they will say, all right, let's talk about this. But basically, Martin, we have to cram it down their throats. We just have to cram it down their throats. They will not accept it. There's no honorable way this is going to be handled. There is no honor among those people. They want things to stay the way they are. They do not want to deal with big change on their watch. And so it won't happen. But what we'll do is we'll just put it on the internet. Anybody will be able to see it for what it is and make of it what they will. And then they'll have no choice. And that's what the hominoid people are going to have to do as well. They have to put the data out. They haven't put it out yet, you'll notice. That's the mistake they're making. They have to make the data publicly available to everybody to look at, stem to stern. I mean, they claim they have whole genomes. Well, okay, just put them out there. Not a problem. Let everybody else have a look. And then the peer-reviewed journals, if it's valid, I mean, if it shows up what it's supposed to be, the peer-reviewed journals will come lining up, knocking on their door.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. This is kind of a cold claim, sort of maybe even a little hurtful, but it says, and again, I'm quoting it directly, there are important ethical issues about the way in which the remains of a child, whether human or alien, are being used for commercial gain.
Right. Well, that sounds like maybe from the Novella piece. There's a guy out there named Stephen Novella.
Right, I know who he is, yeah.
Yeah, who has a real, whatever reason, he's just decided to make war on us back from 99. And he's carried it through. I've tried to talk to him. I've tried to reason with him. I've tried to explain to him where the things that he writes and says about it are just completely wrong, which they are. And he says, no, it stands as it is. I'm just not going to, all he does is change the date sometimes, or makes I think he's made a couple little cosmetic changes to his basic article from 1999. But his material has been shown to be so abysmally wrong, and he just doesn't have the spine to deal with it. I don't know why. I really don't want to know what his problem is, to be honest with you. But that sounds like from there, I think that sounds like him. I don't know really where you got that quote. I don't recall it. But the point is, you can make that argument, as kind of a slur, but on us. But what does science do? Science does every skeleton, every fragment, every fossil that they pull out. Mm-hmm. They're doing research on it, and they're gaining financially from the enhancement of their reputation, from drawing more money, more funding, more grants to their work. I I mean, it's all about money for them, too. And one of the things that they use against us is, well, they're just in it for the money. Well, the truth of it is, we have made very, very little money from the Starchild up to now. Every time I ask for money, and I have asked very few times. Recently, I asked for, I think it was $6,000 because we needed to buy some kits, all of which is accounted for, because I'm very aware of the spotlight that shines on me as I do this stuff. And so I account for what I get and, where it goes and all that. But nonetheless, we do need help, and we do get donations from people, and we're very, very grateful to have that, because we are excluded from the grant system that allows scientists to dip into to carry out the most absurd. I mean, and I'm sure you've heard them on Jay Leno and David Letterman and all that, the absolute absurdities that scientists spend literally millions of dollars doing just because it's a whim on their part. Nothing important, just whimsical stuff.
I agree with you 100%. First of all, that was a good answer to the last claim. And I agree about this. I think of this all the time when I hear of these ludicrous studies out there with not really having any means to an end of anything in particular. And you're right, millions of dollars are totally wasted, in my opinion, with funding on certain things. So that's all the skeptic claims that I wanted to throw at you. But what are you looking to achieve if you reach your goals?
Bottom line here, Martin, is that we're going to change history as history seldom gets changed. Mm-hmm. I mean, we're on a par to do what Copernicus and Kepler and Galileo did 500 years ago when they moved the Earth from the center of everything, from the physical center of everything, to where it really belonged. That was a 100-year process because, information didn't flow very fast, and it took a long time to break the stranglehold that religion had on human thought at that time.
Right.
So then there was, again, in, let's say, 1900, turn of that century, a questionnaire was sent to a couple of hundred of the top scientific brains of that era. Do you think men will ever fly in heavier than air machines? Mm-hmm. And like 95% of the answers came back no, because of all the, the physics are all wrong. There's no way, and they gave all the reasoning, the scientific reasoning of the time of 1900, why men would never fly in heavier than air machines. They could fly in balloons, sure, because people were flying in balloons at that time. But heavier than air machines, no, that's not going to happen for all the various reasons that they all were 100% convinced was true. Nobody consulted two bicycle shop owners in Dayton, Ohio, who were busy, attempting to do it, and were going to do it 3 years later in 1903. So what they did was they put us all into the air, and they shrunk our world to a manageable size. And so now what we're in position to do is on that scale. We're going to move humanity from where science has put it today as the biological center of the universe. Yeah, they concede we're not the physical center of the universe, but we are the biological center of the universe, human beings. And what the Starchild shows is that no, we're not. We're just like 500 years ago. There's just not a lot of difference between where we are now. We need to be put into our real, true place in the grand scheme of things out there. And we need to find our seat at the galactic round table or whatever's out there. But we are not the biological center of the universe, and that's what the Starchild will prove. So history doesn't get made much bigger than this, and that's what we're in position to do with the Starchild.
So just a couple of, I've had, a number of listener questions I actually fed in there, here and there. But one is from Mark, who does our transcribing and work on the website. He wanted to know if there was any progress on the Queen Shubab genetic testing. I may have pronounced that wrong.
Right. No, Mark, I got to say, Mark, and anybody that knows about that, that's a mystery. What happened for those who don't know, and this might take a little time. In Zecharia Sitchin's last book, he gave an explanation for why he felt that the king and the queen found in the tomb at Ur in Sumer when it was unearthed. This is modern-day Iraq. One of the rare tombs in which an apparent king and queen were laid out, along with over 100 other people who died with them. That was not the common way it was done. So Sitchin came to believe that queen, Shubad, was in fact Princess Puabi, who was a direct line descendant from the goddess Inanna of the Anunnaki. In other words, a pure goddess, Inanna, produced a hybrid offspring, but she had Inanna's mitochondrial DNA, and Puabi was the offspring of that woman, and so she had Inanna's mitochondrial DNA. Remember, we were talking about it goes down from females. So Zechariah's argument was that if you could recover Puabi's mitochondrial DNA, you would be looking at Inanna's mitochondrial DNA. And how might that differ from human mitochondrial DNA? It is a great point. It is a great thing to do. So when Zechariah died, his part of his estate asked me, because I was going over to England to lecture, if I would swing by the history museum there that had her body and talk to the woman that Zechariah had been talking with about this and see what could be done. And so I went and I talked to her, and she showed me what the original book. I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen a land journal. I mean, it's a giant book, Martin. It's like 3 feet on a side almost, that they used to do land survey work with in courthouses.
Yes, I've seen those.
That's the kind of book that these guys use to record all the bodies in the tomb and stuff like that. Well, there are two written records of what's found. There's the initial one that doesn't say that Shubad's head was outsized or perhaps conehead sized. And then the second one, the one that Zechariah locked on, said that her head was outsized. And if you look at the headdress for her, it's outsized. So that was all very exciting.
Wow, great.
But then Margaret Clegg, the woman who runs this, she, prior to my going there and meeting with her, she pulled the body, what was supposed to be the body, and she looked at it. And she said, I see what they say, and I see Mr. Sitchin's point, but that's not what I see in the body down there. I don't see an outsized head there. And I said, well, is it possible somehow they got the wrong, body in the wrong place? And she said, well, anything is possible, but I can't imagine they would make a mistake like that for something this important. So we got a sample. We did get a sample and sent it with a geneticist in, I think, Norway, named Eski Villerslev, because that was somebody that Sitchin was working with. And I have tried to follow up with him about what's been recovered, and I just hit a wall. I'm not getting anything. I don't know what's what. Because if they found a pure human, if they found purely human mitochondrial DNA, well, then maybe that wasn't Shubad's body after all. You see what I mean? If they got something really radically different, you think they'd come out with it, but they haven't. So the answer to Mark is, I don't know. I wish I did know, but that's the background of the story for those who might have an interest in it. And it's just, watch this space, patent pending kind of thing. I don't know.
What do you think the immediate future is for the Starchild Skull at this point?
Well, it sits in a bank vault, and it waits for us to accumulate the money, to find an investor. It isn't like we're accumulating money. We're not asking for people to, donate to the cause. It's millions. It was ridiculous. That wouldn't work. I'd never get away with that. So we just keep looking for an investor. We have an investment situation here where someone puts the money up. We get the DNA recovered. We shoot a documentary film of that process. We put that film out. That film makes the money back for the investor, and hopefully everybody comes out a winner.
Too bad Rockefeller isn't still around.
Yep.
He'd probably be interested in that. Well, thank you so much, Lloyd. It's been really fascinating, and thank you for answering all those tough questions.
Not a problem, Martin. I appreciate you giving me the platform to put my side of it out there against all those who are lined up against us, and eventually the truth will prevail. That's what keeps me going.
That's great. Great to hear. So that's it for the show today. Thank you for listening, and if you'd like to send me a message, that's martin@podcastufo.com. Our website is podcastufo.com. If you're listening on iTunes, please leave us a review. You can follow us on Twitter or like us on Facebook. Thanks a lot for listening.